Haine was released in 1995 and is directed by Matthew Kosovitz and stars Vincent Cassel, Hubert Condu, and Saïd Tamois. I apologise now if I've butchered those names because I probably have. The movie basically follows three friends who are essentially wandering around Paris waiting for news of their friend in the hospital who was seriously injured in some riots against the police the night before. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I reviewing a random French movie from the mid-90s? Now, I have two reasons for that. First of all, this movie turns 25 this year, so that is a good enough reason to review it. But also, this movie is absolutely fantastic, and I feel like not enough people have seen it, and not enough people are aware of how fantastic this movie actually is. And that is primarily the main reason I wanted to review this movie, because I watched it the other week, and it truly blew me away, and I want to get more people to watch this movie because it truly is a very special movie that not enough people have heard about. This is one of those movies where its plot isn't necessarily the main focus of the film, and instead what is the main focus is the themes that it's trying to get across and the relationship of the main characters, and that is by far the strongest aspect of this film, without a doubt. These three characters of Vince, Hubert, and Saïd is so good, and you can tell that they are all legitimately friends and they do get along well with each other, but that being said, underneath the surface, they do have their grievances with each other, and that does come to the surface at a few points throughout the movie, whether that be right in each other's faces or whether it be during some quieter personal moments with individual characters on their own. And I thought the chemistry between those three is one of the main things that carries this movie forward and makes it as good as it is. But I will say one thing: the strength of that main trio is definitely backed up by how strong the style and direction is of this movie. Because one of the other things that absolutely blew me away about this movie is how it manages to ride a very fine line between being stylized but also grounded in a very gritty and harsh reality that it sets itself up in. Because when this movie was released, these riots that were happening in Paris were a very real thing. This isn't just a thing made up for the sake of the movie. This is something that was actually happening in France, specifically Paris, during the mid-90s. And the fact that the movie pretty much tackles that subject head-on and goes for a very grounded and realistic take on that is very interesting to see play out in this movie, because there are times in the movie where the tensions between this group of characters and the police is very taut, and you can feel the tension right from the moment the scene starts. However, like I said, besides being very grounded in a sense of reality, especially in terms of what was going on in France at the time, there is still also a bit of style to the movie. There are certain shots and certain things that they do with the camera in this film that feel very stylized, but not too much that it takes away from the real message and the real grounded tone that it is going for. And there are a few specific shots in this movie that I thought were really, really impressive, purely through how the camera work was done, but also how it kind of emphasizes a certain character's perspective of a thing, or it just emphasizes a certain tone or a certain feeling that the movie wants you to feel in that specific moment. And I loved the camera work in this movie. To be honest, on a technical level, this movie is really, really good, especially considering this is a debut feature and it was also pretty low budget as far as I'm aware. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was a low budget movie at the time. But yeah, everything on a technical aspect is fantastic. The camera work is brilliant. The soundtrack is really, really good and fits with the tone and era of the movie. It's a very 90s oriented soundtrack, so there's a lot of hip hop, there's a lot of R&B and all that kind of stuff, and it just works to set up the style that the movie is going for. I mean, to be honest, if I had to compare this to any other movie, I would say this is almost like a grittier, slightly darker version of Do the Right Thing. And what I mean, and I know that's a bit of a bold statement considering Do the Right Thing is about the black community in America and Haine focuses on the youth community in Paris during the mid-90s. But what I mean by that comparison is that they share a lot of similarities in terms of messaging, soundtrack, and especially structure. The structure of this movie and the way it plays out and the messages that it tries to get across throughout that structure is very similar to Do the Right Thing. There's not really much of a plot for the majority of the movie, but it all comes to a head in a very climactic finale that kind of comes out of nowhere. That's what Haine is like, and that is what Do the Right Thing is like. And I think that is a decent comparison to make, especially if you're someone that might be intrigued to watch this movie. That is the best comparison I can make. It's like a grittier, darker, and French version of Do the Right Thing. I'm going to be honest, I genuinely don't know what else to say about this movie. It's a brilliant piece of filmmaking. It balances a raw and grounded tone with a stylized tone very, very well, and the three main performances are all absolutely brilliant, especially Vincent Cassel as Vince. He is fantastic in the movie because throughout the entire film you can tell that there is something under the surface that is waiting to snap. You know, he wants to really get at the police for what they have done to not just his friends but his community, and you can tell that there is just an angry side to him that is just waiting to burst. And that's probably most noticeable in the movie, in probably the most famous scene in the film, which is a scene where Vince is looking into a mirror and kind of almost in a sense recreating the scene from Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. That whole scene in the film is really good, and yeah, it happens very early on in the movie, but it is a really good showcase of what Vincent Cassel is capable of as an actor. But that's not to say the rest of the film he's bad. He's brilliant in the entire movie. I'm going to have to give this movie a 10 out of 10. Everything from the filmmaking to the performances to the soundtrack, it all works so damn well, and I'm just surprised that not enough people have heard about this. I mean, it's a very popular film in France, and quite a few people in the film community know about this film, but there are quite a lot of people, I'm presuming, that don't even know this movie exists, and it's a shame because this is probably one of the most important films of the 90s in my opinion, especially in terms of what it's trying to get across in its messaging and themes. I do think this is a must-watch for any film fan, or just anybody in general, especially someone who is looking to get more into foreign language movies. This is probably one of the perfect places to start. It's a nice balance of style and raw, grounded, realism that I think it's pretty accessible for most people. Damn, this is the easiest 10 out of 10 I've given to a film since probably 1917. So guys, that was my review of Haine. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.